Ask longtime boat owners which boat they regret selling, and the same names come up again and again, because some fishing boats create a loyalty that borders on stubbornness. Owners keep them for decades. Families hand them down like heirlooms. And when one finally reaches the open market, there's usually a buyer waiting who heard about it before the listing ever went live. Today, we're counting down 7 fishing boats that owners simply refuse to sell. And the boat at number 1 has people hunting down the exact hull their father let go 20 years ago. Let's get into it. Number 7. The Lund Pro-V. Most buyers hear the word aluminum and stop listening. Cheap, tinny, entry-level. That's the assumption, and it costs those buyers one of the most complete freshwater fishing platforms ever built. The Lund Pro-V is an aluminum multi-species boat, with used examples running from $25,000 to $75,000. And here's the first surprise. In walleye country, nobody thinks of it as a budget option. In Minnesota, Wisconsin, and across the Great Lakes, the Pro-V isn't seen as a boat. It's seen as the boat. And once someone owns one, getting them to part with it is nearly impossible. Why? Start with what it can actually do. The Pro-V's hull was designed for big, cold, wind-whipped water, the kind of 3-foot chop that Lake Erie and Mille Lacs can generate with almost no warning. It runs drier and softer than an aluminum boat has any right to, and it does it while drafting shallow enough to work a shoreline. The fishing layout is just as serious. Massive rod storage, live wells positioned where tournament anglers actually need them, deck space that swallows 3 anglers and all their gear without anyone tripping over a cooler. But that's not the real reason owners never leave. The real reason is what happens over time. Aluminum shrugs off the exact abuse that sends fiberglass owners to the repair shop. Rock strikes, rough landings, frozen ramps, gravel pits, none of it matters much. It's completely normal to find 30-year-old Lunds fishing hard every single weekend. And here's the detail that tells you everything. A striking number of them are still owned by the family that bought them new. In the upper Midwest, Lunds get passed from father to daughter, from uncle to nephew, like deer rifles. Owners joke that you don't really buy a Lund. You get adopted into the brand. It's only half a joke, because when a Lund owner finally does want something different, that something is almost always another Lund. 4th and 5th time repeat buyers are common, and the old boat usually goes to a relative, not a stranger. That's why used Pro-Vs barely touch the market before they're gone, and why dealers in walleye country keep informal waiting lists of buyers hoping a clean one comes through. The resale numbers stay strong because the boats almost never truly leave the family. If you fish freshwater and you've been ignoring aluminum, you've been ignoring one of the tightest owner communities in the sport. Now, the next boat might be the most misunderstood fishing boat in America, because everything that makes owners hold on to it is invisible from the dock. Number 6. The Parker 230-20. At first glance, the Parker 230-20 looks like it should be checking crab pots. No sweeping gel coat lines, no LED light packages, no lounge seating. Just a plain, upright pilot house boat that most buyers stroll straight past at every boat show. And that first impression is exactly why the 2320 is one of the most underestimated boats in America. Used examples run from $40,000 to over $100,000, and some 15-year-old boats are quietly selling near their original purchase price. But the more telling number is how rarely they sell at all. Forget resale for a moment, because the Parker's grip on its owners is hidden in the calendar. That enclosed pilot house makes this a genuine 4-season fishing boat in a 23-foot package. While the center console crowd is winterizing in October, Parker owners are running offshore in November with the heater on. For anglers in the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Pacific Northwest, that's not a comfort feature. That's 2 or 3 extra months of fishing every single year. That sounds minor. It changes everything. Once an owner has tasted a 12-month season, going back to a fair-weather boat feels like a demotion. That alone keeps Parkers in the same hands for decades. And this is where the story gets interesting, because the reason Parkers last comes from who they were originally built for. Parker earned its reputation supplying commercial fishermen along the Carolina coast. People whose income depended on the boat starting, and whose lives occasionally depended on the hull holding. That workboat DNA never left. The hulls are hand-laid and heavily built. The systems are deliberately simple. Fewer pumps, fewer modules, fewer things waiting to fail. Marine surveyors will tell you something remarkable about old Parkers. They survey clean, with almost boring consistency, because there's so little on the boat that can quietly rot, corrode, or delaminate. There's a well-worn story pattern in Parker circles. An owner buys one as a temporary boat, planning to upgrade in a few years. 15 years later, they're still running it, because it never once gave them a reason to leave. Owners describe these boats the way farmers describe old tractors. Not with passion, exactly, with trust. And trust, it turns out, is the stickiest emotion in boating. When Parker owners do move on, it's usually to a bigger Parker, and the old boat often goes to a fishing buddy who's been asking about it for years. So the Parker fishes more months, breaks less often, and quietly convinces its owners that selling would be a mistake. The next entry solved a completely different problem, and it looks nothing like a workboat, but its owners are every bit as impossible to pry loose. Number 5. The Pathfinder 2200. The average buyer looks at the Pathfinder 2200 and sees a pricing problem. It costs more than mass-market bay boats, but it doesn't carry the boutique mystique of a custom flat skiff. Used prices run from $30,000 to $90,000 or more, depending on generation. And first-time buyers ask the obvious question, what exactly am I paying for? Here's the answer, and it's the piece of insider knowledge that makes experienced inshore anglers hold these boats so tightly. Pathfinder is built by Maverick Boat Group, the same builder behind Maverick and Hughes, two of the most respected names in technical flat skiffs. All of that skiff-building obsession, the precision hull work, the fanatical attention to how a boat poles, drafts, and drifts, flows directly into the Pathfinder line. The result is a bay boat that runs skinnier than boats its size should, stays remarkably dry crossing open water, and fishes like a purpose-built tool rather than a compromise. But the spec sheet still undersells it, because versatility is what makes owners refuse to give the 2020 up. This one hull can pole a redfish flat at dawn, run a choppy pass to hit the nearshore reefs at noon, and pull the kids on a tube in the afternoon. Very few boats in any category cover that much water, literally and figuratively. Owners will tell you the same thing in slightly different words. Every time they think about replacing it, they realize the replacement would take 2 boats, so they keep it. And you don't have to take anyone's word for the fishing side. Look at the parking lots of Gulf Coast redfish tournaments, where Pathfinders show up in numbers year after year. Tournament anglers don't buy marketing. They buy whatever wins, and they keep what wins even longer. Here's what happens in the used market, and it surprises people every time. Clean 200s in Florida, Texas, and Louisiana routinely go under deposit within days of listing. Some sell sight unseen, from photos alone, to buyers 3 states away. And plenty never get publicly listed at all, because word travels through fishing clubs and owner groups before the ad is ever written. That's what happens when the pool of buyers who want a proven, do-everything bay boat is enormous, and the people who already own one almost never let go. Quick pause before we get into the top 4, because this is where owner loyalty stops being a preference and starts becoming an identity. If you're enjoying this breakdown and want more boat reviews, rankings, and buyer guides, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to Boat Verdict, and turn on notifications so you never miss a future upload. Now, back to the countdown. Number 4. The Contender 25T. Put a Contender 25T next to a modern family center console at a dealership, and the Contender loses the walk-around comparison every time. Sparse seating, minimal frills, no beach club transom, no entertainment package. Casual buyers glance at it, glance at the price. $50,000 for older hulls, up past $150,000 for late models, and head toward the boat with more cup holders. Serious offshore fishermen look at the exact same boat and see something completely different, because they know where the money went. It went into the hull. The 25T runs a deep V with a rough water reputation that borders on legendary, built for people who run 30, 50, even 80 miles offshore. Out there, sea conditions aren't a comfort question, they're a safety question. Ask around any kingfish or dolphin tournament circuit in Florida, and you'll hear the same sentence, repeated with small variations by different crews. The Contender got me home. And here's the thing about a boat that gets you home. You don't sell it. Crews that have been through genuinely bad weather on a 25T develop an attachment to that hull that sounds irrational until you've been out there yourself. What newcomers consistently miss is that range and ride aren't luxury features. They're fish-catching features. The boat that can safely run farther, in worse conditions, at higher speed, fishes water that other boats never reach. Over a decade of ownership, that's hundreds of trips a lesser hull would have canceled or cut short. The Contender doesn't just ride better. It fishes more, and every one of those trips deepens the owner's loyalty a little further. That loyalty shows up everywhere you look. Ask a Contender owner what their next boat will be, and the most common answer is a bigger Contender. The old boat rarely reaches the classifieds because someone at the marina has usually been waiting on it for a year, and brokers along the Florida coast will tell you clean 25Ts change hands through word of mouth before a listing ever goes public. The value curve stays almost insultingly flat, but that's just the visible symptom. The real story is a brand whose customers behave less like buyers and more like members. If a builder earning that kind of devotion sounds impressive, the next company took the same idea one step further. Its boats are so hard to let go of that owners routinely change their minds mid-sale. Number 3. The Regulator 26. On paper, the Regulator 26 looks like East Coast vanity. Used examples run from $80,000 to well past $200,000, depending on age and power. And buyers outside the Regulator world see those numbers and assume they're paying for a badge and some marina bragging rights. Then they ride one in rough water, and the conversation changes permanently. Regulator Marine operates out of the small town of Edenton, North Carolina, and it does something almost nobody in this industry has the discipline to do. It builds fewer boats than the market wants, on purpose, year after year. The 26 runs a deep V hull drawn by Lou Codiga, a naval architect with a genuine cult following, and the boat's behavior in ugly Atlantic conditions is the entire point of the brand. There's a reason regulators cluster around Oregon Inlet, one of the most punishing stretches of water on the East Coast. When the fleet that fishes the nastiest inlet in the region keeps choosing the same hull, that's not marketing, that's evidence. So what does that ride actually buy you? Confidence. And confidence quietly changes how you use a boat. Regulator owners fish days that other owners scrub. They take family offshore without white knuckles. They come home less beat up after long runs, which means they go again next weekend. Over years of ownership, that confidence stops feeling like a feature of the boat and starts feeling like part of the owner. That's when selling becomes almost unthinkable. And then there's the story you hear over and over in Regulator circles, and it explains this brand better than any statistic. An owner decides to sell, takes the boat out one last time, hits 6-foot seas on the way home, feels the hull do its work, and quietly takes it off the market. It happens so often, it's practically a rite of passage. When a product regularly talks people out of selling it, supply dries up. Combine that hesitation with deliberately capped production, and you get permanent scarcity, waiting lists for new boats, and used regulators that change hands inside communities, sold from one slip neighbor to another, passed to a fishing partner or a friend of the previous owner, often without ever being publicly advertised. Many owners will only sell to someone they know will take care of the boat. Think about that. These are people vetting the next owner of a used boat like they're rehoming a family dog. The Regulator 26 is what happens when a builder optimizes for the owner instead of the showroom. And yet the next boat inspires the same refusal to sell from a completely different kind of owner, and it does it while being dismissed by the very anglers who would love it most. Number 2. The Grady-White Freedom 235. Hardcore anglers see the Freedom 235's dual console layout and dismiss it instantly. A family compromise, they say. A boat that fishes a little, cruises a little, and excels at neither. That snap judgment is exactly why this boat sits at number 2. Because the Freedom 235, priced used from roughly $60,000 to $150,000 or more, might quietly be the most complete boat in America. And boats that fit a family's whole life don't get sold. They get kept. Start with the part the skeptics get wrong. It genuinely fishes. Underneath the comfortable layout is Grady-White's CV2 variable dead rise hull, a design that handles offshore conditions well enough to embarrass plenty of dedicated center consoles. Owners run these boats to nearshore reefs and beyond, fight real fish from them, and come home dry. Yes, the layout costs you some walk-around room at the bow. In exchange, your spouse gets a comfortable seat, your kids get a safe cockpit, and your boat gets used every weekend instead of twice a summer. Ask any longtime boater what actually kills boat ownership, and you'll get the same answer: the boat stops fitting the family, and then it stops leaving the dock, and then it gets sold. The Freedom 235 is engineered to never stop fitting. That's why so many of them never come up for sale. The boat grows with the family instead of getting outgrown by it. But that's still not the real reason owners stay. The real reason is the company standing behind them. Grady-White has spent decades at the top of customer satisfaction ratings, to the point where the phrase, "just get a Grady," has become genuine folk wisdom, passed between boaters like advice about trucks or tools. That reputation was earned in unglamorous ways. Hulls that survey clean at 15 and 20 years old. A customer service department that still answers questions about boats built decades ago. Owners who call expecting a fight and hang up stunned. This is why Grady families exist, households on their second and third Grady, where the Freedom gets handed to a newly married son or daughter instead of being traded in. Dealers will tell you the hardest part of selling a new Grady is convincing the customer to part with the old one. Add it all up. A boat that fishes hard, hosts the family, holds together for decades, and comes backed by the best reputation in the business. When these do reach the market, risk-averse buyers pay a premium for the name they trust, which is why the resale numbers stay so consistent. But most never make it that far. And if the Freedom 235 is the boat families refuse to outgrow, the number one entry is something even more extreme. It's the boat people spend years trying to buy back. You already know its name. You almost certainly don't know its story. Number 1. The Boston Whaler Montauk. Here's the twist of this entire video. The boat that owners refuse to sell more than any other isn't obscure at all. It's the most famous name in American boating. Because almost nobody, not even people who admire Boston Whaler, understands how deep the Montauk story actually goes. Start with the fact that sounds fake. Classic 17-foot Montauks from the 1980s regularly sell today for as much as, and sometimes more than, their original sticker price. Not adjusted for inflation. In raw dollars, modern Montauk 170s run $30,000 to $60,000 used and barely depreciate at all. In an industry where losing half your money in 5 years is considered perfectly normal, one small, plain, unglamorous center console has spent half a century treating depreciation as optional. But those numbers are just a symptom. The cause is that the people who own Montauks almost never willingly let them go. And to understand why, you have to go back to a man with a saw. In the 1960s, Boston Whaler ran one of the most famous demonstrations in boating history. The company cut one of its boats completely in half, on the water, with people aboard. Both halves floated. The back half motored away under its own power. That stunt worked because of Unibond construction, a method that fills the space between the hull's fiberglass layers so completely with foam that the boat becomes effectively unsinkable. It was a marketing masterstroke, but here's what people miss. The same construction that made the boat unsinkable also made it absurdly, generationally durable. Montauks from the 1970s are still running charters today, still teaching kids to fish, still working half a century later. A boat that outlives its original owner doesn't get sold, it gets inherited. And that's exactly what happens, because the Montauk's deepest hold on people is emotional. This is the boat at Grandpa's dock, the boat at summer camp, the boat 1,000 coastal families learn to fish on. Whaler owners talk about their boats by name. They restore 40-year-old hulls the way other people restore vintage trucks, and there are entire online communities devoted to nothing else. Some families have 3 generations of memories on a single hull, and when those boats change hands, it's almost always within the family. That's precisely why clean ones are so hard to buy on the open market. Ask brokers about the calls they get, and they'll tell you about grown men trying to track down the specific Montauk their father sold 20 years ago. Not one like it, that one, hull number in hand, calling marinas up and down the coast. Owners don't just regret selling Montauks. They spend years trying to undo it. There may be no clearer definition of a boat people refuse to sell than a boat people try to buy back by name. But strip away every ounce of sentiment, and the Montauk still earns its grip on people with cold, practical math. One modest outboard around 90 horsepower means fuel bills that barely register. It tows behind a mid-size SUV, fits in a normal garage, and launches solo in minutes. And that convenience creates the Montauk's most underrated advantage. It actually gets used, constantly, casually, on a random Tuesday evening after work, in a way bigger boats never do. The systems are so simple, there's almost nothing to break. The owner community is so massive that every part, fix, and restoration guide is one search away. Insurance is cheap. Maintenance is minimal. It fishes inshore beautifully, tenders to a bigger boat, teaches a 12-year-old to drive, and forgives mistakes that would sink lesser hulls. Literally. A boat that fits into your week, that easily becomes part of your routine, and people don't sell their routines. So who ends up keeping a Montauk forever? Almost everyone who buys one. It's the perfect first boat because it's safe and forgiving. It's the perfect last boat because it's simple and effortless. And here's the pattern experienced boaters know well. People who have owned 30-footers, who have done the big boat years with the big boat bills, routinely come back to a Montauk. They'll tell you it's the boat they use the most and worry about the least. Many will also tell you about the one they sold years ago, and you can hear the regret in the telling. Decades of service, near zero depreciation, tiny running costs, constant use, total peace of mind. That's why the humble 17-footer sits at number 1. Not because it holds its value, because its owners hold onto it, generation after generation for 50 years and counting. So what's the real lesson? The boats owners refuse to sell are never the flashiest ones. They're the ones that keep showing up. The ones that start in April, run in November, fit the family, and get you home when the weather turns. Loyalty like that isn't bought with cup holders and light packages. It's earned, trip after trip, year after year. So the next time you're shopping, ask a different question. Don't ask which boat looks best at the dealership. Ask which boat you'd still be fighting to keep in 20 years. Because the smartest buy on the water is the boat you'll never want to list. And as the used market proves every single day, you won't be the only one who feels that way. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to Boat Verdict, and turn on notifications for more reviews, rankings, comparisons, and buyer-focused boating content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next verdict.